what people do is you essentially you leave it out for a couple of days so that it air dries, and then it kind of hardens a bit.
Okay, hi everyone. So I wanted to end the year off with something sweet, with something festive, and then with a tool that I had been wanting to use for literally the entire year. And that is my Kashigata Japanese wooden, they call it like a cake mold, but it's like a confectionery mold. And I had bought this in Taiwan off of a seller that went to Japan often for business, and then he came back with one of these. And not that you need to know, but it was one of those situations where I didn't have a lot of money on me. I think I had around 25 US dollars left. This was much higher. These are vintage. This one looked really good, and so I was like, please, could you just give that to me, or otherwise I'd have to go out and like get more money. And I didn't really want to do that, because part of bargaining, part of the fun of flea is, yes, one, finding the thing that you want, but two, paying the price that you want for it. And so what I ended up doing was, it's bad, but I happened to take a picture of all of my like wooden cookie molds before, and then I showed it to him, and I was like, see, these are all mine. And then he was like, oh, are they all yours? And I'm like, yes, and I promise to take good care of this one if you sell it to me. So it's been in very good care. I've oiled it, I've cleaned it, but it hasn't gotten any use, and so that is why I've decided to do it today. So I want to talk, one, about Japanese sweets, because there are different kinds of Japanese sweets and how they kind of categorize them, and then two, talking a little bit about these molds before I go into this recipe for these rakugans. So within the Wagashi family of sweets, the Japanese categorize their sweets down either, one, by moisture content, or two, by the method in which these sweets were prepared. Okay, so I'll go into that a little bit later, but if you were to categorize sweets by their moisture content, three different groups. Number one is namagashi. Namagashi sweets are sweets that have over 30% moisture content. So I don't exactly know how they would measure such moisture content, but what some people have said is it's essentially the fresh sweets. So like we're talking mochi with bean paste, things that are probably put into the refrigerator, but like it would only last for a couple of days if you don't freeze it or if you don't do anything else to it. So those are kind of like fresh sweets, higher moisture content, likely to go bad in a few days. The next one is han namagashi. Han namagashi is half wet. It's a half wet dessert. So that is when the moisture content is between 10% to 30%. So some people will say that these are kind of like maybe your baked goods, where it is going to be a little bit drier, but it still has, like good moisture content. And then the third one is going to be your higashi sweets. So higashi, it is the one that we are going to be doing today. They are dry sweets. They are sweets where the moisture content is less than 10%. So that could be something like, candies, things that will travel well. Sometimes people will talk about like the senbei crackers, even though they're not desserts, but they are the drier kind of like sweets, the drier snacks. So interestingly, if you were to divide Japanese desserts via production method, like how you've created it, so there are, sweets that need kneading, steaming, frying, baking, stuff like that. But then also something called uchimono, which is made by mixing powdered ingredients and sugar into a mold and then hardening the mixture, which seems like something that's very, very specific. How can there be more desserts in this category than the dessert that we're making today? Which leads me to the dessert that we're making today, using these kashigata molds. So kashigata, they're Japanese wooden they call them like wooden cake molds, but I think it's like confectionery molds. Doesn't necessarily need to be cake. And they're usually made from cherry wood. I don't know that much about wood carving yet. Kind of want to take some lessons this year, but Japanese cherry wood. And they said that they specifically use this wood that needs to be like at least 3 years, aged 3 years. And I think that that is, I mean, people correct me if I'm wrong here, that will dry out the wood, and then does that make it easier to carve and whatnot? Is that okay? The other reason somebody mentioned is that because there are these molds that essentially they have to align. They said that with cherry wood, it works better. It helps with the alignment. So I don't totally understand what that means, but if somebody knows, let me know. And so with these types of molds, I mean, we've had a lot of them over the years, but with these types of molds, usually there's the ones that join. Okay, so if you can see, they have it's just like a little raise, like a little nubbin raise, and then on the other one, there's like this bit that kind of goes in. Once you have pressed in your dough, you kind of tap it and then it releases like this. So those are the ones where you have the matching. And this is my first time with these like Hashigata molds where they join. And I think they put the V here, I think, to show which side matches with which side. But usually what I'm more familiar with are these other, I'm so sorry. Usually what I'm more familiar with are these kinds of molds that they don't push together, and what you have to do is you kind of have to bang them out once they're done. You know, we've had so many over the years that are absolutely gorgeous. But this Kashigata mold, this Japanese style one, reminds me very much of the Korean dashi cookie molds that, you know, we had also made and used. And it doesn't necessarily join together with like the little nail nubbin that comes out, but it is 2 pieces, and you know, you kind of put a pair of chopsticks left and right, and it's raised, and then once you press in your cookies, you release the chopsticks and then you snap them out, kind of like that. So it reminds me a little bit of, you know, like that, but lots of cultures where they use molds and make sweet things. So okay, stay with me, I'm almost done. The dessert that we're making with these Kashigata molds today is called RAKUGAN. RAKUGAN is a starch or ground beans and sugar mixed or pressed into molds, and it became a part of the Japanese tea ceremony. I think originating, they were saying, in the 1600s. There was the Maeda family that kind of brought that over from China, and because teas were so bitter, like green tea and whatnot were so bitter, they needed something that was very sweet to have with their tea, and so this confectionery industry was born, and then specifically in the Kanazawa prefecture. Today's starch is it's usually glutinous rice flour, but again, it could be bean powder as well. And then we're gonna use a sugar. So in Japan, they have something called wasanban. I'm not going to pronounce it correctly, but in Japan, they have a very finely milled sugar that they use specifically for these sweets. So a lot of people will say, okay, a good substitute for that is just powdered sugar. But I would say, like, if you had kind of, you know, like fine ground sugar, maybe just like stick it into the blender or something, that could really work as well. And if you think about it now, it's a majority sugar, a little bit of starch, and it's just pressed together, right? So it's essentially kind of like a sugar cube. It's a little watered down, but it's essentially a little bit of a sugar cube for your tea. So you're gonna be like, oh gosh, it's gonna be really, really sweet. And I think it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be really sweet, but it also is supposed to kind of be really soft. The mold that I have here is the chrysanthemum design, which is it's important in Japanese culture because it's an emblem of the imperial family, of royalty, longevity, rejuvenation. It's like an autumn flower. But you'll see that if you go and look at these kashigata molds, a lot of them, part of this making these rakugans, it's also like an art form as well. So it should be really pretty as well. It's usually you'll have these special types of treats to celebrate various celebrations. You have your New Year's, you have the changing of the seasons, and so that's why a lot of these molds you'll see are things that are related to nature. It could be like animals, it could be insects, lots of flowers as well. So it's really made as an art form for you to kind of like enjoy nature, and then also have something sweet with your tea, something very basic, something sweet with your tea. So it is, people say it is supposed to melt in your mouth. I hope you all have a happy new year. And originally I was planning to starting off with a whole food plant-based recipe, because I want to be doing that for January. I want kind of some motivation for people to just be eating really healthy, because it can be really delicious, and it's kind of like a nice motivation that way. But I had this mold that I needed to use, and so this recipe is going to be super heavy on sugar. I apologize, but it's really pretty, and even if you don't have these molds, any mold that you have at home, this is something that you can definitely try. So yeah, I hope you all enjoy. Happy New Year to you all. Oh gosh, what do I usually say? Healthy, happy New Year.
So I have here 200 grams of powdered sugar along with about 90 grams of glutinous rice flour. And depending on how many of the sweets that you're going to make, how big the molds are, you're going to want to, either scale up or potentially scale down from this recipe. And I'm going to show an image of the chrysanthemum flower that I'm going to be modeling this after, but it had different colors. It had like a dark pink, a light pink, and so I'm just kind of eyeballing, dividing up the flour based on that amount, and then using beetroot powder to adjust for the different pinks, and then turmeric to adjust for the yellow in the center. I think a good tip here is, because when you add, you're just going to add a little bit of water, from like a few drops to maybe a teaspoon here and there. And the goal is to try to turn the rice flour and the sugar into just like a packable mass so that you can press it into the molds. It was a lot easier to dissolve the pigments first and then add it to the sugar. Yeah, but you might have to play around with it.
I do admit that this part has taken quite a while, and some people recommend actually putting the whole thing in a food processor, because that way you can see the colors mix into the sugar and the rice flour much quicker than just kind of squishing this through. So before we do the molds, I'm going to put a little bit of potato starch in a bag, and in theory that should dust ever so slightly, a very, very small amount of powder onto my mold. Oh wow, this works so well. Like, just the most minute amount of dust. You would never, you couldn't do this with a sieve. It just wouldn't work. Oh wow. According to my photo, a tad bit of dark red in the center. Center,
And I think it can be organic too. Like if some of the yellow mixes with the pink or the red, it'll have a bit of orange, and that will work too, I think. Yeah, and not having it be too neat. I want some of it to go kind of outside too. There is another, what is it? Another like wooden instrument that they use to pat everything down, to smooth everything out. I don't have that, so that's okay. One thing that I wasn't really ready for is when you press this down, which you do need to a lot because otherwise it will crumble, is you need actually a lot of this sugar. So make sure you make enough. Depending on is just to release that, and oh god, oh, it's coming out. Oh, yes, yes, there's sugar all over the place now. Yes. And now, I think it comes off. Okay. Oh my gosh. What? That is amazing. It came out. So now I think what people do is you essentially you leave it out for a couple of days so that it air dries, and then it kind of hardens a bit. Like I've seen some people steam it a bit, but I can't imagine doing that right now. Like I could see this guy melting as well. So you usually leave it out, you know, kind of in a dry place for a couple of days. If you happen to live in very humid, you know, climate, if there's like an airtight container, or I don't know, I'm not sure how this would work, but you're supposed to leave it out, and then it kind of dries up some more, and then you have it with your, you know, your tea ceremony.
Okay, sorry. I imagine you all want me to try a little bit of it. It is supposed to harden over the next day if you stick it someplace kind of, you know, dry. I have some tea, which is not going to be good for my sleep. A little bit of green tea. Green tea is bitter, but I think you grow to like it. And then here it is. Oh, that's so pretty. Okay. Ooh, jeez. Okay. They're so sweet. But I could see it being like a really pretty kind of like, if you make small ones, because this mold was really big, but if you make like really small ones, I could see people you know, having their tea, having like these little kind of decorated sugar cube-esque things on the side. And it would be really pretty. And yeah, you could probably stick some like rose water or like whatever thing that you want in there, and it would be really good. So yes, that's it. That's it.